and to the Insurtech stage. Delighted to have everyone here. My name's Aubrey Hawes. I am one of the producers. I'm the president of Finsiders, a nonprofit that helps put on this event with RevTech Labs. My day job is I work for a little software company called Oracle in their financial services practice. But what's more important, you guys are not here to hear me speak. You're here to hear Lisa Wardlaw speak, who I've had a chance to kind of get to know before we got started. She wears lots and lots of hats. She's been CXO for a lot of different organizations, whether that's the CFO, the Chief Strategy Officer, Chief Digital Officer, really focusing on how do you help insurance companies and Insurtech start to collaborate. We've seen how banking has kind of started to embrace that. At one point, it was this kind of co-opetition type deal, and it's really become much more of a collaborative view. So what I'd like to say is come up on stage, Lisa, just as we get started. So she does a lot of different things. She advises a lot of different companies in their North America sort of capacity. She's president of North America Insurtech for Insurtech Israel. And listen, we are delighted to have you here in the Queen City. I know you're out of Atlanta, so thank you for coming up here.
Sometimes we come to Charlotte.
Exactly.
No,
So
thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. So first of all, I'm super excited to be here. As he said, I do wear a lot of hats, and part of wearing a lot of those hats means I get to hopefully share with you all some trends and some top themes that I'm seeing as we think about Insurtech and we think about really what's going on in Insurtech. So I'm going to pull up our slides. Okay. What I want to talk today about is the age of dynamism. And so a lot of times I talk about, like, what is the dynamic era and what does that really mean for us in Insurtech? But before I go there, I want to read you all one of my favorite quotes, and I am going to use my phone to read it. And it's by a gentleman named Justin Su'a. Justin is a mental performance coach for the Tampa Bay Rays. He has coached the NFL, he's coached the MLB, and he and I often get to exchange discussion and dialogue about how similar it is to doing innovation and transformation as it is to being a high-performance elite athlete, which, so just so if you know, if you do innovation and transformation, you're in good company. And one of the quotes he posted this week really resonated with me as I was preparing my notes and what I wanted to tell you all today. So I'll open with this quote. If you do what everyone else does, you will get what everyone else gets. Uncommon results require uncommon action. So I wanted to start with that because I think a lot of times one of the things that we don't understand is that we try to approach things in what I'm going to call static ways. So as we go through Insurtech and innovation, we continue to automate, we continue to digitize, we continue to transform, but we're doing it, unfortunately, sometimes in common ways. It takes a very strong vision. It takes even stronger execution. And I would like to say it even takes stronger know-how. Like, you've got to have been in the trenches. Margot and I talk about that a lot. You can't just come in and say, hey, I want to do this. You've got to have actually been there, done that. So what I'd like to share with you all this morning is how we can be uncommon in our results of Insurtech. So moving forward, I want to start with a journey through time, because I was actually on a stage, it was 5 years ago, and I was actually presenting this concept of 5 and 50. Have any of you all heard of the 5 and 50 concept? No? I love the honesty, because you probably shouldn't have heard of it, because it was statistics that we made up back in the day. And back in the day, what we were doing is we were studying a little company, a very small company called Ping On. Anybody know Ping On? Yeah? Ping On is one of the, sorry, I'm starting the timer. Ping On is one of the premier Chinese-based digital insurance companies that started OG, I always call it OG, like originally digital. And if anybody's ever worked with Ping On or had experience with Ping On, they're somebody to truly like aspire to in terms of their digital strategy and how they meet their customers where they are. Back in those days, I was working as strategy officer for Munich Re, and I was doing special projects for Board of Management. And as part of that role, what I was trying to do was ascertain, where are we going? Where is the industry going? Where are the trends going? And so I had a company do about 6 months research, and what they came up with was this lovely 5 and 50. I'm like, wow, that was a lot of research for like 2 numbers. And the 5 and 50 meant we will see more change over the next 5 years as an insurance industry than we have seen in the last 50 years. And so I want you all to think about 2017 for just a moment, and now think about 2023, so I'm skipping a little bit, 5 plus, and I want you to think about how much change you've seen unfold in literally those 5 years. And so I think it's kind of cool to think back in 2017, when I was saying this, everyone's like, oh, that's just hype, that's hyperbole, that's to get on stage and say 5 and 50, yes. But what we were really doing was a call to action. So we have seen that change, but I guess I would like to lead this session with, it's not enough. Mainly the change that we saw and have seen and continue to see is digital. It's digitization of things that already existed. So let's go a little step further and talk about trends that are going to continue to propel us, in my mind, in a quantum speed. Oh, thank you, lights. Okay, so the world is no longer static. Static, I want to talk to you about what it means, but digital, this is what I am emphasizing, alone is not enough. It's not sufficient. If you think about it a little bit, all of our hierarchies, all of our business models, so I kind of break this down into 3 things: data, underwriting or risk acceptance, risk monitoring, and business models. Most of our business models that we live, operate, and continue to create and operate in were created as a result of the post-industrial revolution. Think GE, think hierarchy, think repeatability. The entire objective and goal of the post-industrial revolution was repeatability, consistency, understanding what's going on. That's why we have things like Lean, Six Sigma, et cetera. It was to improve and continually to improve stable processes, right? Even process reengineering is a result of the Industrial Revolution. I have a game, if you want to play it later with me. Come find me and we can debate anything and I can somehow tag it back to the Industrial Revolution. Happy to play that game. Okay, but what happened is the digital world comes in. And in the digital world, it becomes dynamic. In the dynamic world, we're kind of creating currents that are coalescing against this linearity world of the post-industrial revolution. So when I started working at startups, anybody here from a startup? Anybody work at a startup? Yeah, love seeing the hands. Love seeing the hands of so many experienced people that are working at startups too. When I went to startups, the first thing that I noticed was everyone kept saying, well, the carriers are so difficult. You know, they're so antiquated. We are. They're so antiquated, they're so difficult. And you know, the Insurtechs, and then I'd go to the carrier side, well, the Insurtechs just don't understand what it's like to be an enterprise. They don't. You know, the Insurtechs don't understand what it's like to do this and to do that, and it's a lot of Figma screens and PowerPoint, but how's it really gonna work in reality? And I went to 3 Insurtechs in a row, actually working for the Insurtech, so not being an advisor, which is what I do now. And I noticed this pattern that I noticed. By the way, I went to geospatial startups. And so I was doing natural catastrophe, geospatial climate, and then I was also working on longevity and the future of like all these wearables and all these little devices we all have. And so I was working on both those things. And I like to say there's probably not a problem I couldn't try to solve. And the observation I have was, it wasn't this thing of insurance carrier versus Insurtech. And most people that you would hear on stage would say, we need to collaborate. We need to understand one another better. We need to sit across the table and give and take. And I would say yes, but that wasn't the problem or the pattern that I kept observing. The pattern that I kept observing, and this is great that we're at a FinTech and Insurtech event, is that the piping, i.e. the plumbing that all this is coming through, is built for static processing. It is not built for dynamic or streaming or fluid so that the water flows through it. So I want to take you all through this real fast, because at the end of this, what I want you to walk away with is an understanding of looking at the problem and reframing it differently, so that as you leave today, you can say, oh, that's actually the problem. It's not a he said, she said, like carrier versus Insurtech. It's actually that we all collectively need new piping, and how are we going to get that new piping to actually fuel this dynamic era? Okay, static. I know this is very obvious, but I think it really drives home a point. Lacking in movement, action, or change. Anybody deal with underwriting? Hands up. Don't be ashamed of driving the revenue of the entire industry. All right. What do we do in underwriting? Point-in-time risk decisioning. Can I have a heck yes? And then our lovely reg tech over here, it's like you can interject bias in there so you can't continually update that risk. Okay, we're gonna flip to dynamic in a minute. I just wanna stay with underwriting. It's a snapshot. I was underwritten for my life insurance maybe 25 years ago. I clearly am a different person, different risk profile now. Now, what's happened is my risk profile has been updated based on some standard table, et cetera. But they don't actually know that I work out, that I wear this Oura ring, that I get on average 7.1 hours of sleep a night, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's move into dynamic. Characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. So for those of you that raised your hand that said you work in underwriting, risk is never static, is it? Absolutely not. Experience is never static. Absolutely not. Humans are never static. Absolutely not. So why are we here? We're here now because, flip, we didn't originally have the tools, the capacity, the ability to see information in real time. So we did the best that we could do. We built static processes. I want everyone to acknowledge it's not like we're so antiquated. It's not like we're so horrible as an industry. We did the best with what we could for the economics of the business that we were creating and serving at that time, which meant predominantly insurance, I won't go so far as to say banking, but definitely would say insurance, was static or point in time. Ergo, today's reality is ever-changing. Nothing is static anymore. And to couple that, the ability and affordability of having information in real time has never been better. So do any of you deal in data? Data processing? Almost all of you, right? How quickly and how imminently can you get data now? Like less than a minute, 30 seconds. If you wanted data, now we're not talking about affordability and we're not talking about, you can even get data and leave it where it is. You don't even have to reposit, move, or co-locate data anymore. You can apply federated learning to data where it is. I work with a lot of OEM people on telematics and hyper-personalized federated learning. The capability of data now has never been more impressive. So we can literally, like Hulu, stream risk. Now, that's amazing. And as a consumer, I interact with these other things all the time. I go to Starbucks, things are changing, things are moving, new apps, new things are updated. And then when I go to insurance, I'm like, I did that 25 years ago? How am I gonna take that into account or be updated? Okay, so we have seen, so I wanna give credit where credit is due. We have seen some traction in mainstream areas, like usage-based insurance, like embedded, like cyber. I would actually advocate that cyber is one of the things that gives us the best illustration of how to apply dynamic into a static world, because cyber by definition is never static. So cyber, I would say we didn't really have a choice. We had to jump into dynamic. But what this really does is it says, how do we enable greater adoption of Insurtech? So let's go back to the fact that we have plumbing that was built for static processing. Take a fire hydrant, pop the cover off the fire hydrant, and the water's gonna go, right? Like just explodes into the street. That is basically like an Insurtech, trying to pump its capabilities into an insurance carrier. Because what's coming isn't just the advanced tech. What's coming is the hydraulic force of dynamic. Again, remember over here on the insurance side, even if they have, wait for it, APIs. Even if they have APIs, it's the force, it's the hydraulic force of the dynamic information that's coming at the static processes is where this breakdown occurs. And when I started studying that, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think people know that that's actually the problem. So we can't solve the problem just by collaborating if we don't understand how to adapt and ingest the hydraulic force of all of the capabilities that all of the Insurtechs are actually bringing front and center. Everybody with me so far? Yeah. I'm going to check our timer. Okay. So, if that's the case, then what do we do about it? Do you give up? Absolutely not. Do you make it, do we have insurance carriers here? Yeah? Heck yeah? With pride, right? Okay. There we go. Oh, okay. Do we have some technology vendors here? Yeah? Admin platforms? Admin platforms is going to be one of my favorite examples. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to think about this beyond the immediate problem that we're tackling. So what I see a lot of people do, rightfully so, is we're like, okay, I've got to attack a claims process. And I'm going to take you all through a couple of examples. In a minute, I'll take you through a couple of use cases. I'll bore you with some geospatial, and then we'll talk about some underwriting scenarios in life. So I'll give a mix of P&C and life just to make sure it's like interesting on all circuits. But what we have to do is go beyond that incremental problem that we're trying to solve and get down into the details of, ready for it? Policy administration. What? It always comes back to Enforce. I see some of my colleagues nodding their heads. Is Enforce dynamically enabled today? Anybody? Using the definitions static versus dynamic? I'm leading the witness here, right? Absolutely not. And so when I was uncovering some of this, and for those of you who are admin vendors, you probably know that I'm the first one that's going to call you. I'm like, hey, Socotra, hey, EIS, hey, Guidewire, hey, Majesco, hey, da-da-da. I'm just going to go through my little list. And I end up calling, like, the chief strategy officers of these companies. I'm like, so have you thought about how you make policy master and policy enforce dynamic? Like, what do you mean? We do consumer updates, we do customer updates. I'm like, no. How do you make that dynamic or fluid? So one of the things, and so like, let's rewind back. Our 5 and 50 was exceeded. We all acknowledge that. But we're all still, I don't want to say plateauing, but we're all still at this edge where we kind of can't get past this edge, right? It's like the apex. How do we get through that apex? And when I think about that, I think, oh my gosh, it's because it's not dynamic yet. So how do we make it dynamic? So let me give you 2 examples. Are there P&C people here? Show of hands. Yeah, proudly. Life. Show of hands. Okay. Other, health, wellness. I do some stuff in longevity too. Okay. I just wanted to make sure my examples were covering the audience. Okay. So let's take, I'm going to use natural catastrophes, geospatial as my first example. One thing that we did, so I was working in a company that did large-scale geospatial. They actually built satellites. So they had a technique that could see through clouds, through darkness, through smoke, through smog, anything like that. And what we were trying to do was pivot from supporting claims, which is important, to supporting underwriting. And one of the aspects that we have, and we're seeing this, we were just talking about being in New York with the smog and all these things, is we have real-time like events that occur and real-time change in conditions that occur. But we're trying to figure out a way to apply geospatial to the underwriting and update our risk profiles more iteratively. So what I mean by that is, how could we stay in a state like California with wildfire risk and not exit the state? Because what we could do was start to see things much more clearly, much more real time, and then connect that to something like usage-based risk determination. So how could someone then have, it gets complicated, I won't go into all the pricing complexities with this, but then how could somebody have almost like variable pricing indexes that are offsetting based on the changing risk profile? Now, I'm sure most of you know that when we got into the underwriting side of this, so we had the tech, right? Bring the tech, we have the tech. When we had the tech, but what we were trying to do was, how do we update the underwriting risk models, I'll just say risk models, and risk determinations in a real-time way. Well, when we were able to do that, we figured out that the underwriters couldn't use it because they didn't have access to informing the usage base, the pricing, and the risk determination. So how many of you all have ever faced that? Where you go in and you're solving a problem and you're like, hey, I've got a solution. The other side's like, yes, I want this solution. And then you're like, wait, now it's no longer going to work because there's not a functionality for that on the other side. So what we actually did, and I'll get to a genetic example of this in a moment for life and health. What we did was we went into a different aspect of the process timeline. So the creativity here is, come on, we can't change pricing regs and rules and how everyone is going to, we're not yet at dynamic pricing or surge pricing like your Uber rides or something like that. We're just not there yet. But what we did was we decided we could come in at an alternate step in the process after risk was accepted, and we could use and leverage that technology to do what we call portfolio risk balancing. Anybody in here in NatCat events? Okay, so portfolio risk balancing is where, think of it as debits and credits. You want good things to offset the bad things. And what you want to do is you want to keep your portfolio balanced. This is actually just a common risk management strategy at any point in time. And so what we were able to do was implement dynamic portfolio balancing, where while they couldn't change the price or the risk acceptance as the dynamic data was coming in, what we could do is go out there and buy a lot of good risk in real time. Think of it as a derivative for banking people. Think of it as a derivative or hedging strategy. We were going out and buying, using our technology, enabling the underwriter and then the risk purchase portfolio manager to say, now I can offset my risk in tandem or in real time as the risk is unfolding. Does that make sense? Okay, so that is one of my favorite examples of dynamic. Does that make, are you guys good with that one? Yeah? Because it's kind of like intimate. We can have a discussion if you guys want. Okay, great. The second example of this would be underwriting bias, and I'll take life insurance and health as an example. So remember I said my life insurance was probably underwritten 25 years ago-ish. And yes, I have been working for that many years. What happens is I've changed. The world's changed. How many people wear some form of a wearable? A watch, a ring? Yeah? Okay. So 2 interesting things about that. First interesting thing about it is, how do you leverage that data for risk understanding as a life insurer, as a health insurer, or as a life reinsurer? And so I used to run Munich Re life and health operations and strategy for North America. And we're very interested in that data because it affects our understanding of mortality. But we can't change pricing. So again, similar situation, similar scenario where you want real-time data. That data is dynamically and continually updating. But when that data gets updated, you can't actually use that data right now in the regulatory environment to change risk acceptance and pricing, because that would be bias, right? Okay, so again, the option was, and this was a genetic company, so I'm going to give you a real example. Genetic company, they have this amazing genetic solution, and as part of their solution, they offer genetic counseling, and if people go through the genetic testing and do the counseling, they can actually prevent something like 90% of like genetic anomalies, right? Like things that might develop, cancer, all these things. Okay, but you can imagine, are any of you cringing like, oh my God, my life insurance, knowing my genetic code, what would this mean? Okay, so what the strategy here was, we can't affect underwriting, we can't affect risk decisioning, so let's take it in and go at a different part in the process. Because genetic data is, first of all, very supportive to people who want to live a long, healthy life. And life insurers as an industry are trying to find a way to, how do we support that? How do we actually stand up and say, we're not against you, we're actually literally, not just lip service, for you. And in that moment, what they've decided to do is keep all the data private. The life insurers don't see any of this data. In fact, they're not allowed to see any of the data. but they offer it as a paid-for service, kind of like a 23andMe, but like a much more elevated lab genomic test. And then they offer the genetic counseling. The life insurer benefits because they get engagement with you, because you're now doing something other than 25 years ago applying for life insurance. You're engaging with them. They also know that you're likely they're going to have better mortality because of what I just said statistically. If people do genetic testing, et cetera, their mortality on that block will improve. But what's most fascinating about this is the fact that they found a way to come in after the underwriting after the point of pricing, and they found a way to engage and stay with the customer and transform. Dynamically, that data is now being connected to IoT data, sleep data, sensor data, et cetera. The insurance companies are not the data conglomerate. They're actually not managing that data. Remember I said earlier, like we're borrowing these OEM tactics to allow the data to sit at rest where it is, and we're applying federated machine learning on that data where we don't see the data, we only see the output of the machine learning. I see some nods over there. Very complex data strategies being put to life. And what's happening is the mortality data and the health and wellness data that we're getting off of this is so robust, because now we're able to connect paradigms of sleep, of conditions, of health, of genetics, and the insurers are supporting that in a way that says, okay, we can learn from this. Because at the end of the day, another thing, for those of you that raise your hand in life insurance, people often think that we're about saving a little bit of money processing claims or processing premiums. Would you guys, I call it the OpEx paradigm, operational expense focused paradigm. Would most of you say most people think that that's like, I've got a solution, it can save you money. And I'm like, so politely, it only costs me about $3 million a year to run my claims department. I try to save about $1 billion a year when I do strategic projects. So even if you could eliminate my entire department, which by definition you can't, at best you're talking 10 to 20%, I don't care what tech you've developed, you're not gonna save me that much. But if you can get into the, let's call it 500 million to $1 billion mark, then you have my attention. How do you get to 500 or $1 billion? Any actuaries in the room? Oh, wow, I don't have a single actuary in the room. This is so cool. Okay, yeah, so I can say all sorts of stuff and y'all won't tell on me? Okay, no. A 1% change in mortality assumptions, 1%, is usually, in North America, for any reinsurer, on average, is usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 million to 1.2 billion. So if you just think about a 1% movement in mortality, we're talking in the level of magnitude that we care about. And that all comes full circle back to dynamic enablement. So what I wanted to take you all through was these, we cannot, which is my point number 2 here, Insurtechs cannot succeed without the enablement of dynamic processing by carriers. It's the fire hose. And the APIs don't get rid of that hydraulic force that's coming at them. But what I want to, the bright line is that you all can help them think through, it's the entry point. Because in both examples I just gave you, hopefully you see that we did enable dynamic processing in both scenarios. I mean, some of the coolest things I've ever worked on, so yes, I'm giving you some of my really good examples, but in both scenarios, we did not end up static. I think that that is the future of Insurtech. I think that is the future of where insurance carriers need to go. I think that you all in this room are gonna be the people that are gonna have to help them think through that. Because remember how I started this by saying, how do we yield uncommon results? You cannot do common things to yield uncommon results. And I don't mean to say that people are not thoughtful, that people are not strategic. I don't mean to say that people aren't intellectually trying to solve problems. But often, too often, we only solve problems with the arsenal that we've been exposed to before. And so one of the things I think, like, as you continue on the conference and you listen to all the amazing speakers that they have lined up for you, is how can you take that and apply that to thinking things in a new way? how can you elevate the common into the uncommon? Because without you all driving this, like, I mean, I do have a lot of awesome clients, but I can only be so many places at so many times. You all can drive this with your organizations, with your Insurtechs, with your carriers, with your admin systems, with your processing platforms, and you can start to say, how do we accommodate for that hydraulic force that's going to come out at us? I just want to see one more. Okay, I've got a few more minutes. We have to get into an expansion of traditional processing. But yet, at the same time, you should say, but Lisa, our core business is collecting premiums. People often forget about the investing this, and paying claims. And I would say, yes, that is our core business. We are not going to change the core fundamentals of what we do, but we will change the way in which we evolve that, in which we embed that, in which we make that intuitive, not counterintuitive. So, what I'd like to ask you all is, how many of you all have recently had to file a claim with anybody, an insurance carrier, personally? Big hands up. Okay, leave your hands up if that was an auto claim. Okay, leave your hands up if you were satisfied by your experience. Oh, cameraman in the back was like satisfied. We won't name names, but I'm glad you left your hand up. Okay, I have this like experience. So there were a couple of hands that were satisfied. I do want to talk to you afterwards about your experience and who your carrier is, because I'm shopping. Okay, I won't name names on stage, though. I promise I'll be good. Okay, so to connect all this, currently, what a lot of people experience, and I'll kind of like look at you all when you raise your hands I say this, is that technology right now is insultingly intelligent. And by insultingly intelligent, I mean there's a lot of apps. There's a lot of things like scan your car. What? No. I have an example where like I scanned my car. I did the whole thing. I had to wait 3 months to book an appointment at a body shop because of the supply chain, which I understand, by the way. It's not my insurance company's fault. I have a Suburban, just as a background. They recommended me to the body shop because of the technology. I wait 3 months, take my car in. I'm a working mom. It's like, get my kids, get the car, get there. You know, it's like moving like rockets to get there. I get there and they go, ma'am, we can't service a Suburban at this body shop. Our body shop's too small. And I think insultingly intelligent. How can I have gone through 5 apps to file a claim, deal with a claim, scan the claim, visualize my car? I wait 3 months and I end up at a body shop that's like macro data level. We don't take Suburbans. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Which the fast forward that story too, I still haven't gotten my car fixed. It got wrecked at the end of January. There's this big taillight out and all this stuff. And I'm like, and I think I work in the insurance industry for digital transformation. So the reason why I say that is clearly that's an example of a process still being what? Static. It may be digital. I had 5 apps. 5, count them 5. None of them talk to each other. It's one of the biggest insurance carriers in the US, by the way, because clearly I'm not like with I should be with somebody that's different, but I'm not. But when I look at that, I think, first of all, I want to go work for them to fix that problem. Margot's like, we'll get something spin up. We'll fix that. But the other thing I think about is, how many of us live that? So when you raise your hand as a consumer, not as a professional, as somebody that interacts with insurance, not, we're in this industry, not somebody that excuses it, are we where we need to be yet? No. And I don't think any of us would deny that, and I'm not up here saying it to be negative. 27 years, every day I wake up and I try to change this industry. Every day I wake up and I give it my all. And every day I wake up and I think, we're so close. Because 5 and 50 has been exceeded. We do have more digital. We have more apps. We finally got rid of checks. I mean, my gosh. during COVID, I was trying to deal with, I was CFO of Farmers during COVID, and we had facsimiles. And I'm like, no, I can't be dealing with death claims via facsimile. Turn them off. So we have made a lot of change. But the material shift's gonna come from overhauling the core of our business. Don't think that we can get rid of all legacy tech, though. We've got to find the entry points in the process that allow us to shift into ingesting this hydraulic force. With that, I want to thank you all. You guys were great. I'm glad we had some time together, and I hope you have a great conference.